Ancient Rome was a world turned upside down. We will uncover the most bizarre sexual practices of the Roman Empire, a journey that will permanently change how you see the ancient world. This is not just about scandal, but about a society where sexuality was a public tool, a religious act, and a brutal display of power. You will discover why a god with a permanent erection guarded Roman gardens and how a week of sanctioned chaos kept the social order intact. What does it truly mean when a civilization's private life becomes a public spectacle? Walk through any wealthy Roman's garden, and you would likely find a strange guardian watching over the fruits and flowers. This was Priapus, a minor god with a major and impossible-to-ignore feature, a permanently enormous erection. His statue was not hidden away in shame, but placed in the open, a crude but powerful sentry. This was not about private vice, but public virtue. The Romans believed his exaggerated form possessed a magical power, a force that could make crops grow, and just as importantly, scare away thieves and the evil eye. His presence was a promise of abundance and a threat to any who would disrupt the peace of the home. This belief in the protective power of the phallus extended far beyond the garden wall. Roman parents would hang a small charm called a fascinum around their children's necks. Soldiers would wear them into battle. This was not a piece of jewelry, it was a spiritual shield. The word fascinum itself comes from the same root as the verb to enchant or to bewitch. They believed this symbol could literally fascinate danger, turning malice and misfortune away. It was as common and as unquestioned as a modern person wearing a lucky charm or a protective religious symbol. You would see these symbols everywhere in daily Roman life. They were crafted into wind chimes that tinkled in the breeze, their power activated by sound. They were pressed into the bread at bakeries, a stamp of fertility and prosperity right on your daily loaf. Elaborate mosaics at the entrance of grand homes often featured the image, a clear message to all who entered. In the Roman mind, these representations were not obscene. They were integral, a fundamental part of a world where sexual energy was a tangible, creative, and protective force. It was as normal as a horseshoe over a door for luck, yet infused with a raw, divine power that modern society has largely forgotten. How did a society that placed such powerful, protective importance on sexual imagery in public life then channel that same energy into its most chaotic and sanctioned public festival? But that same protective energy could transform into something far more chaotic and liberating. For 1 week each December, the entire rigid structure of Roman society was turned completely upside down. This was Saturnalia, a festival in honor of the god Saturn, and it was a time of sanctioned madness. The ordinary rules of life were not just bent, they were deliberately shattered. Masters would wait on their slaves at lavish feasts. Slaves could speak their minds to their owners without fear of punishment. Gambling, usually forbidden, was permitted in public. The social hierarchy, the very bedrock of Roman identity, was temporarily dissolved in a whirlwind of celebration. This inversion extended powerfully into the most intimate areas of life. Roman sexual norms were built upon a strict principle of active and passive roles, deeply tied to one's social status. A free-born Roman citizen man was always expected to be the active, dominant partner. To willingly take the passive role was seen as a shameful surrender of his social and masculine authority. Yet during Saturnalia, these very expectations were challenged. Historical accounts suggest that some free men engaged in role reversal, symbolically relinquishing their dominant position. This was not a secret act of depravity, but a public performance of rebellion. It was a conscious stepping out of one's assigned social skin. This bizarre practice served a profound purpose for Roman society. Think of it as a carefully designed pressure valve. An entire year of built-up tension between masters and slaves, between the powerful and the powerless, needed an outlet. By creating a temporary world where all norms were inverted, the state allowed for a massive collective release of pressure. People could experience the thrill of rebellion and the exhaustion of absolute power in a safe, limited context. When the festival ended after 7 days and the social order snapped back into place, everyone returned to their roles with a strange sense of catharsis. The system, having proven it could survive its own annihilation, felt stronger than ever. How could a civilization that so openly displayed sexual symbols and sanctioned such role reversal also harbor a deep, simmering anxiety about female sexuality? Yet this society that celebrated the power of sexuality in its symbols and festivals also policed the public body with ruthless precision. A deep and unsettling contradiction lay at the heart of Roman values, one best seen in the lives of its most popular entertainers. Actors on the stage and gladiators in the arena were the rock stars of their day, adored by the masses, but this public adoration came at a devastating personal cost. They were branded with the legal label of infames, people of ill repute. This was not just a social slur, it was a formal legal status that stripped them of fundamental rights. An infamies could not testify in a court of law, a critical disability in a society built on litigation. They could not hold public office or serve in the army. In the eyes of the law, they were often grouped with prostitutes and treated as little better than slaves, despite the crowds chanting their names. The root of this disgrace was the simple act of performing for money. For a Roman elite, the body of a free citizen was a private vessel of dignity, not a public commodity. By appearing on stage or in the sand, an entertainer was seen as selling their physical self for public consumption. They were making a spectacle of their body and voice, something a respectable Roman citizen was never supposed to do. This was considered a profound surrender of one's social honor. We have records of high-born young men swept up by a passion for the theater who performed and faced immediate social ruin. Their families would disown them, their political careers would vanish before they began, and they would be thrust into the despised class of the infames, all for the crime of public performance. Nowhere was this contradiction more glaring than with gladiators. These men were the ultimate sex symbols of the ancient world. Graffiti from Pompeii praises specific fighters, noting how they made the hearts of young women swoon. They were depicted on expensive pottery and in intricate mosaics. Their sweat was sometimes sold as an aphrodisiac. They embodied a raw, violent masculinity that was intensely attractive. Yet these very same men were, legally and socially, considered the lowest of the low. Most were slaves, criminals, or prisoners of war, and even those who were free citizens accepted the stain of infamy the moment they stepped into the arena. The public adored the image of the gladiator while despising the man himself. This reveals a core tension in the Roman psyche, a society that was simultaneously mesmerized by the physical spectacle and deeply fearful of the moral pollution it supposedly caused. How could a culture so obsessed with public image and personal honor reconcile this glaring hypocrisy? The same society that policed its entertainers so harshly produced emperors whose private lives became public nightmares. When a single man held absolute power, the very rules that constrained everyone else seemed to dissolve, and the result shocked even the Romans. Emperor Caligula stands as a prime example of this terrifying freedom. He was rumored to have engaged in open affairs with all three of his sisters, a violation of both family loyalty and social law. He did not stop there. He reportedly declared himself a living god, and in a move designed purely to humiliate the elite, he allegedly turned part of the imperial palace into a brothel. The most shocking detail is that he staffed it with the wives of prominent senators, forcing these noblewomen to serve his clients. This was not a story of secret vice. It was a public demonstration that no one, not even the most respected families, was safe from his whims. It was power used explicitly to degrade and control. His successor, Nero, took this transgression into even more theatrical territory. His marriages to men were not hidden scandals but public ceremonies, celebrated with dowries and bridal veils. In one infamous instance, Nero married a freedman named Pythagoras, and during the ceremony, the emperor himself took the role of the bride. For a Roman audience, this was an inconceivable act. The emperor, the pinnacle of Roman masculinity and power, had willingly and publicly adopted the most submissive role possible. This was more than a personal eccentricity. It was a direct assault on the social order he was supposed to embody. Rumors also swirled about his sexual cruelty, adding a darker layer to his story. These tales, whether fully true or exaggerated, painted a portrait of a ruler who saw the entire world as a stage for his most extreme desires. Perhaps the most radical figure was the young Emperor Elagabalus. His behavior went beyond breaking social rules and ventured into the realms of religion and identity itself. As a priest of a foreign sun god, he introduced bizarre new rituals that horrified the traditional Roman elite. He was said to have married a Vestal virgin, a priestess sworn to absolute chastity, an act so sacrilegious it was punishable by death for both parties. Most remarkably, ancient historians report that Elagabalus offered a vast fortune to any physician who could equip him with female genitalia. This is one of the earliest recorded instances of a search for what we might now understand as gender confirmation surgery. For his contemporaries, however, it was simply further proof of his madness, a total rejection of his assigned role as emperor. These stories of imperial excess are more than just ancient gossip. They represent the ultimate intersection of absolute power, religious innovation, and sexual transgression. When an emperor like Elagabalus fused his foreign priesthood with his imperial authority, he was not just being weird. He was challenging the very foundations of Roman religion and identity. These rulers were testing a frightening hypothesis: what happens when one person is completely above the law? Their bizarre practices show us the outer limits of a system where power had no check, and where the private fantasies of a single individual could become the terrifying public policy of the world's greatest empire. These stories of gods, festivals, and emperors paint a remarkable picture. The bizarre sexual practices of the Roman Empire, from public phallic worship to the sanctioned chaos of Saturnalia and the unchecked decadence of its rulers, reveal a society with a framework for understanding sex, power, and the body that is radically different from our own. These were not simply random acts of perversion. They were deeply embedded in the machinery of the state, woven into religious rituals that sought to protect the community, designed as social pressure valves to maintain order, and used as political tools to display absolute authority. What seems shocking or contradictory to modern eyes made a strange and coherent sense within their own world. The protective fascinum charm, the role-reversing festival, the despised but adored gladiator, and the transgressive emperor all operated within a system where sexuality was a public force, not a purely private matter. So we have to ask, which of these Roman practices did you find the most surprising? Was it the god with the permanent erection guarding the gardens, or the week where slaves became masters? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If these historical mysteries have captivated you, subscribe for more journeys into the past, and always remember that the truth of history is often far, far stranger than anything fiction could ever invent.